listen to that, huh? Glory. When the Sex Pistols unleashed this noise on the UK back in 1976, many people were outraged. See, at a time, musicians were still singing about peace and love, but that didn't really reflect what was going on in the world, and specifically in England at the time. So while they were all hippy-dippy, the Pistols, led by Johnny Rotten, aka John Lydon, were talking about the England that they saw. And the music that they made sounded like treason. God save the Queen. She ain't no human being. John, with his anti-monarchist stance, was a lightning rod in the storm. He was attacked in the streets, and wherever the Pistols played, there were fights, there were arrests, and there were national scandals.
The whole world would be vastly improved by their total and utter non-existence.
But John, reviled by many in Britain, was actually loved by a lot of people who felt disconnected. But that guy actually grew up a shy, quiet boy in northern London. When he was 7, he contracted meningitis and was in a coma for a year. Missing that much school put him behind, and other kids bullied him, called him a dummy. But the experience, he says, was the first step towards becoming this. But like many groundbreakers, the Pistols quickly imploded. Amid broken bottles and blood on a disastrous American tour, John moved quickly to bury the myth of the band. He formed Public Image Limited, the world's first post-punk group, that had a huge influence on bands like Massive Attack. Today, John's still got that vitriol. He's got things to say about American punk record companies and, of course, the London riots. He also makes a cameo in a new film called Sons of Norway, about a young boy who suffers a tragedy, then channels the rage and alienation he feels into punk rock. And who'd know more about that than our good buddy John?
Hva det egentlig han synger om, Johnny Rotten?
Forskjellig.
Det ikke mye han liker.
Han anarkist.
Anarkist? Jeg synes det virker som han imot absolutt alt, det.
No, I'm not kidding. I didn't know it was a TV show with an audience, so I should try to be humble.
No. Will it be a difficult task for you to be humble?
Oh, if you know you don't mean it.
This is an interesting film because you don't have to be humble in this film. This film really is about a lot of things.
Yeah, Sons of Norway.
Yeah.
Well, what do you want to know?
I mean, it's an interesting film for a guy like you because it puts you in a pretty strong position in this family's life and in this kid's life. How did you decide to be a part of a movie like this?
Well, it kind of reflects back to 1978 and what the punk movement meant to a lot of kids from a deprived industrial housing estates and the underprivileged and the disenfranchised and so it's from a Norwegian point of view. I mean, people know about punk from like the English stance or the New York fake stance, but they don't know it really as, oh yeah, that's right. They were all a hell of a lot older than us.
You're not calling the Ramones the fake stance.
Well, they used to do things with their mummy and daddy's money. You know, they had instruments to play. They had garages to rehearse in. You know, they had all nice things set up for them. Us lot, you know, if it fell off the back of a truck, you know, it would land very happily in my hands. Not getting the opportunities out of life, but instead of being turning to crime or becoming a criminal, to try and find something constructive. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that film kind of shows that. It's a perspective of a very young lad trying to come to grips with the confusion of adult life. Because adults really, they're not the greatest indicators of how the world should work, least of all to children.
There's a neat scene when the father talks to the son and says, so I've been listening to this record, and he holds up the Bollocks record, and then he has all these opinions on what Johnny Rotten doesn't believe in or doesn't... When you hear that opinion of it...
I know what you're getting at. It's really hard to, like, to watch yourself being analysed in that way. But when it's constructive and for the greater good, then I don't mind that at all. I mean, I've been under a microscope all my life now.
But was it right?
Most of it. You know, starting so early in the Sex Pistols, I never had what you could really call a proper childhood. Mm-hmm. You know, between childhood illnesses straight into that world of chaos. But it's all right. If the end result is honest, then it's all worth it.
When you look back at that guy, the version of you in that band when you were a kid, I mean, it was also brief as well, because not only did you have the illness to that chaos, but that chaos ended, and then you created the PIL thing, and then that went away for a while. So when there was a void at some point in the public creative space. Did you feel a void?
No, that's when the record companies managed to make me bankrupt. And that, of course, stifled a lot of activity. And it was such a financial hole they put me into that I was in a form of semi-retirement, really, until I could raise the money to get back up and start things up again. The way I've run after the Sex Pistols, public image, for instance, was I'd raise the money myself. And so I'd be the one, like, paying the wages, paying the equipment, renting the halls, etc., etc. And that's a really difficult thing to do. But if you love what you're doing, you do it. When a record company kind of rescinds on the borrowing process, you find yourself very quickly in a serious financial hole. And when they don't help you to crawl out of that hole by limiting the amount of records they put in the stores, so you can't possibly make up the debt through sales, it's a serious problem. And then you've got a media out there, of course, that doesn't back you.
Were you the...
because they're just happy that the saucy one has gone away.
But in a sense, though, isn't it turnabout is fair play? I mean, you guys did a good job of pissing all over them for a long time, so when they pissed back...
I just told the truth.
And maybe...
I told the truth. Anyone who thinks they can have a hand in my back pocket, you know, is going to get a word or two.
Did you ever have an identity struggle?
Identity struggle?
Yeah.
No. When I was 7, I lost my memory through meningitis. It took me something like 4 years to fully recover who I really was. And from there on in, I think I really did know who I was. So I've got no doubts about myself these days.
And it never faded, never at all?
No. It's when you recover from an illness that serious, the one thing you rely on from there on in, and it's a guideline and a principle in my life, is that I expect people to tell me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but, as I will do to you. I will not lie. I will not about anything. I can't afford to, because once you've lost your memory, you have to bear this in mind. You need to believe what people are telling you. When they're telling you, I'm your mother, you need to know that to be true, even though in the back of your head you don't know this at all. It's a wonderful thing to find out that people haven't lied to you, and it's a terrible thing to find out that they have.
So if you...
Don't hurt people. The most serious way you can hurt anyone is to lie. Any kind of a lie.
When did you first experience that?
Except, of course, if it's in Irish storytelling.
Then it's okay. Then it's usually with some...
Paddy's about, they know what I mean.
When did you first feel like you were lied to?
Oh, school teachers. You know, it's just an example. You know, they'd go, you have no hope, you have no prospects. The best you can look forward to is working in a bank. I mean, me, I can't count to 10.
Is that why you guys always in 1, 2, 3, 4?
You know, and I'm not a stupid person. I love books. I love reading. I love everything to do with like absorbing knowledge. And because of the background you're from, the school system in England then, no, didn't want you. They would view you as a social climber. Mm-hmm. And so I decided not to be climbing that way, and I made my own life.
So when the riots were happening...
I am Johnny Rotten, quite rightly.
You were in that position, for sure. Is there a difference between Rotten and Lydon in your mind?
Well, one gets paid more.
And depending on when, that's changing.
It's interchangeable.
When you saw what was happening with some of the riots in England, did you understand where that was coming from?
Yeah. Yeah, and don't trust what the media tell you. Don't trust what the British government tell you. In fact, you've got to bear in mind that this is just kids that want a TV. You know, why not nick it? If there's no law and order in the country and there's no government you can trust in, then this is what you're going to get. And it wasn't whole-scale, enormous rioting. It's small pockets of people's. When it first started, it began for a serious reason. A man was shot dead by the police in Tottenham. Now, the police's justification of that was that he was carrying a gun. No, he was not. He had a water pistol in his sock, right? That's a good enough reason for people to be upset. The police refused to really answer that in any logical way, and so one thing led to another, an escalation into total violence. don't lie, you know. Ouch, I made a mistake and shot him would have been something of an answer, but...
Do you think that would have changed the
It's
result?
a lie starts the process, and then you've got no leadership in the country. You've got the Prime Minister away, the head of police, God knows what holiday he's on, the second in command to the Prime Minister, they're all off, you know, cavorting around the world, sipping wine and having a fine old time. So there's no leadership. So when this, like, gets out of hand, it took them 3 days, really, to come back and have anything like an answer to it. And so now what you've got is you've got them yakking on about, like, we need more riot police. No, you don't. You need to treat the youth of today with some sense of respect, all right? And you need to give them something that they can do in the evenings. If I'm going to tell you about a species, I think in the human race, what I think is our greatest example was after that disaster in Japan, you know, the earthquake and the tsunami, they, I think, shine like a beacon to us as human beings. No riots, no looting, no hatreds, no spite, no rage, no war. They stood up and helped each other. And their country is now in a serious state of recovery because they love each other. And ain't that a good example?
Stick around, more with John Lydon when we come back. As you can probably tell, we have a live studio audience. I'd love it if you would join us. Go to strombo.com/tickets for more.
Do I buy Country Life butter because it's British? Do I buy Country Life because I yearn for the British countryside? Or because it's made only from British milk? No, I buy Country Life because I think it tastes the best. It's not about Great Britain, it's about great butter.
Dr. John Lydon, also known as Johnny Rotten. So there is some commercialism you will engage with.
I don't despise commercialism at all, particularly when you actually like the product. And let's face it, British butter is the best.
Why'd you do
This
that?
butter campaign, when this was offered to us, it struck us as like the most anarchistic thing I could ever do in my whole life. You know, a basically non-food product, really, you know. What it did was, it wasn't an enormous amount of cash, but it was absolutely sufficient for us to get public image back started, so I could raise the money. Right, so every penny of that went back into Public Image Limited, probably the best band in the world. And butter helped us to do that. That was very, very important, because the money wasn't coming from anywhere else. So, record industry, 2 fingers, you know, butter.
Are you going to be doing more of that?
Yeah, Tampax next.
Next, nice. Somehow that
It's a
doesn't surprise me,
puzzlement,
John.
but-
Doesn't surprise me at all. All right, who's the biggest sellout in music?
Well, wasn't there an album by The Who called The Who Sellout, so it must be them.
It wasn't them. That was a long time ago. How about Lady Gaga?
Oh, I love her. She's great fun. Absolutely hilarious.
Pink Floyd?
I know some of the players. Very nice people. And some of the records, too.
How do you feel about the Tea Party in America?
They seem to be so bigoted and poisonous and stupid and ridiculous and small-minded that they're probably perfect for America.
That's the country that you live in, sir.
You know I jest.
We know what you think about the British Prime Minister. We know how you feel
I
about
think
that.
they're giving tea a bad name.
The film is called Sons of Norway. John Lydon, everybody. We'll be right back. Johnny Rotten, a.k.a. John Lydon, were talking about the England that they saw, and the music that they made sounded like treason.
God save the Queen!
John, with his anti-monarchist stance, was a lightning rod in the storm. He was attacked in the streets, and wherever the Pistols played, there were fights, there were arrests, and there were national scandals.
The whole world would be vastly improved by their total and utter non-existence.
But John, reviled by listen to that, huh? Glory. When the Sex Pistols unleashed this noise on the UK back in 1976, many people were outraged. See, at a time, musicians were still singing about peace and love, but that didn't really reflect what was going on in the world, and specifically in England at the time. So while they were all hippy-dippy, the Pistols, led by
Synger om Tony Rotten.
Forskjellig.
Det ikke mye han liker.
Han er anarkist.
Anarkist? Jeg synes det virker som han imot absolutt alt, det.
moved quickly to bury the myth of the band. He formed Public Image Limited, the world's first post-punk group, that had a huge influence on bands like Massive Attack. Today, John's still got that vitriol. He's got things to say about American punk record companies and, of course, the London riots. He also makes a cameo in a new film called Sons of Norway, about a young boy who suffers a tragedy, then channels the rage and alienation he feels into punk rock. And who'd know more about that than our good buddy John? Many in Britain was actually loved by a lot of people who felt disconnected. But that guy actually grew up a shy, quiet boy in northern London. When he was 7, he contracted meningitis and was in a coma for a year. Missing that much school put him behind, and other kids bullied him, called him a dummy. But the experience, he says, was the first step towards becoming this. But like many groundbreakers, the Pistols quickly imploded. Amid broken bottles and blood on a disastrous American tour, John